Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's April 13th. It's a Monday. It's kind of turned into a Monday mashup because there's lots of different news in the soccer world, and we'll try to get caught up on all of it, see where things could possibly be headed if we know anything more than we did on Friday. First off, I hope everybody got some sleep in the metro Atlanta area last night because storms were rolling through, and I know there was a tornado warning very, very late. I finally did fall asleep after my own tornado siren or thunderstorm siren named Gwen finally barked herself out and passed out after she was a little riled up in the early stages of it. And it's left some pretty big devastation around the southeast. It's headed up the eastern seaboard right now, but I think we were kind of on the edge of it and didn't see too much. We didn't have any power issues or anything like that. What about you guys, John?
No, we were fine, short of the wind that came through late last night, and then the tail end of the front that came through town about 2:30. We heard the sirens going off, and it was a couple of miles south of us where there had been some debris that had been picked up on radar that was in the air. And so middle of the night from about 2:30 to 3:30, the humans were awake. However, the selectively deaf guard dog decided that he didn't want any part of it and didn't hear anything. So that was a unique experience for us, that his selective deafness has taken over for thunderstorms, which is something he's never been a fan of.
Selectively deaf, huh?
Yeah, well, like when, and I'm sure that Gwen could be selectively deaf as well. It's like,
No.
when you want Gwen to do something and Gwen just looks at you or doesn't even look at you, and it's just like, hey, Gwen, and she doesn't turn around, she doesn't pay attention, wants to do her own thing. Troopers,
that doesn't happen.
No?
That doesn't happen. The only time she is selectively deaf, it's not being selectively deaf. It's when she is barking her head off at something that she doesn't like, and it's like, hey, stop. And she's like, no, you stop. I'm going to keep barking. It's not being selectively deaf. It's just not following instructions.
Yeah, no, we have selectively deaf now that Trooper is, we think, 13, and so he's, he decides when he wants to listen. Like, when you want to go outside for a walk or something, he's more than happy to hear you at that point. But if you want him to do something that he doesn't want to do or be in a place that he's not supposed to be in, he's just, he either just stares at you blankly, using air quotes, and I know that doesn't go well for radio, or his back is just completely turned and he's not listening, and you have to either pound the floor with your fist or some kind of other thing that gets his attention, and then he still ignores you.
Yeah, that doesn't really happen with Gwen.
Happens in Office HD.
Well, luckily, didn't get too bad through the city. Hopefully, where you guys are out there listening, you didn't see the worst of this. And there have been tornadoes that touched down as part of this system. So it's up in the North Carolina area right now, right?
Yeah, it's hugging the coast. Our friends in Charleston are in for a long morning, and so think of the coastline, because our friends at ESPN Coastal, Savannah, Charleston, Wilmington, New Bern, that's where it's working its way right now. Last night, we know that Chattanooga and Northwest Georgia got hit pretty hard as it was making its way to the Northeast. We also know that a lot of parts in Mississippi kind of got two separate waves in the afternoon and in the evening. So obviously, we're thinking about and sending the best vibes to everyone who was affected by what's going on last night, one way or the other.
All right, we got a lot of different things to get into in the soccer world. If you guys have questions, you guys have comments, please throw them our way on Twitter at SoccerDown here. What do we have latest, anyway, in the Premier League?
Broke about a half hour ago, and now Spurs had decided that they were going to place their non-playing staff on furlough, but they have now come out with a statement reversing their decision, and they will not use the government furlough program to pay staff. They're now going to pay their staff their wages in full through April and May, and a lot of folks had let Daniel Levy and the front office have it any way humanly possible. They're still going to furlough their staff, but they're now going to pay them instead of their previous thought pattern.
Did they give a reason why they changed their approach?
The fire that was given on social media, they admitted that their fans were correct when it came to the notion of reversing their stance and doing it the way that they're going to do it as of a half hour ago, as opposed to the way that they initially did it. Their statement. In our last update, quote, we said we would keep our position under review, especially in the context of revised budgets and cost cutting. Having done so, we have decided that all non-playing staff, whether full-time, casual, or furloughed, will receive 100% of their pay for April and May. Only the board will take salary reductions. The criticism the club has received over the last week has been felt all the more keenly because of our track record of good works and our huge sense of responsibility to care for those that rely on us, particularly locally. It was never our intent as custodians to do anything other than put measures in place to protect jobs whilst the club sought to continue to operate in a self-sufficient manner during uncertain times.
That last part's the key. I mean, that's the part that everybody's going to have to understand is going to come into play the longer this goes. Operate in a self-sufficient manner during these uncertain times. You're self-sufficient when your expenditures, match your revenue, and there's no revenue. So this is not going to go away. Yeah, I mean, your ownership has a lot of money. How much money are they going to be able to lose in this situation? I don't know. It's different for every club. There's no answer to that, to be honest. There's no one answer to that. And it is a reality. And it's something that, Spurs says were urged particularly by the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, who released a statement condemning the actions in this furlough process. It's something that everybody's going to have to face here because every club is being affected by this. And, whether you have, very wealthy ownership or you don't, and nobody's bringing in revenue right now, and everybody's got costs. So it's a rough situation. I think Tottenham, Liverpool, the bigger clubs do have to understand the PR side of it as well. And that's the balancing act, isn't it? I mean, that's what it always is.
Yep.
You have to balance what is right for the business with what looks right for the business. And that's the challenging part in a time like this where there's not a playbook. There's no precedent to look back at and say, yeah, if you do this, everything will work out. People are figuring it out on the fly. I think some of the outcry is a little much here, but yeah, for now, everything's fine. But that last part of the statement is very, very important. Operating in a self-sufficient manner is not easy to do at the moment.
No. And along the other news out of the Premier League, Sheffield United have furloughed some permanent and casual staff, but will continue to pay them in full as well. Employees who are unable to perform their regular duties owing to the shutdown are the ones affected, but the club are not currently using the government's job retention scheme. So Sheffield United has now done that as well with their staff.
And Sheffield United's one that will probably have to sooner rather than later. Keep an eye when you're paying attention to this stuff. Keep an eye on the definitions here because furlough at times gets used in an official sense and at times gets used in just what the word means. So the way Tottenham and Sheffield United are using the word furlough here is in just what the word means. I mean, these people aren't working because there's nothing for them to do. They're staff that has specific activities, and there's none of those activities happening right now. But they are continuing to be paid while there's nothing for them to do.
Right.
That is
so
the traditional furlough. There is a government furlough scheme, system, like we would call it, scheme as it's called in the UK, and that's a different situation altogether. Tottenham and Sheffield United are not using that currently.
So, and remember, and you made this point last week on the show as well, that when you hear the word scheme, it's not meant as something to game the system. It is
right.
That is
it
just
is
their, that is their terminology for doing what they're doing. It is not a negative in their parlance and in their way of describing their framework when it comes to unemployment, not working, whatever you want to call it, various stages of both.
Scheme is just anything. Not even specifically that. Just scheme is any kind of plan, structure, or what have you. It's just scheme doesn't have the negative connotation that it does here.
And that's the thing that's another one of the things that I wanted to make sure that folks just understood. When you hear the word scheme, don't freak out.
Yeah,
it's not a negative.
That. What else What else is going on right now? What do we have?
All right. So here's an interesting thing that I came across in researching for the show this morning. Apparently, the Premier League is blocking their broadcast partners from asking anyone that they decide they want to have on to interview. You're not allowed to ask about the coronavirus crisis, or you run the risk of being blocked from having any Premier League guests on your networks for any kind of interviews.
Okay.
Example that was given by the Daily Mail. Frank Lampard was on Sky, and so he did an interview, but you weren't asked. You were told to not ask Frank Lampard about the resumption of the football season. So basically what the Premier League wants to do is keep all of these interviews of a lighter nature, and you're not allowed to ask any questions going down that road.
I mean, kind of get it, kind of don't. If you're going to ask questions about, process for resuming play and those kinds of things, Frank Lampard's not the person to ask. That's a definite, and you're putting him in a bad spot. I do understand that. I would assume that when you make an interview request, and I mean, you can speak to this, when you make an interview request, usually you're going to say what the interview is going to be about. If it's an interview about a classic game or just how you're doing during this. I mean, I would assume anyway that Frank Lampard comes on the show, you're going to talk about whatever, World Cup or time with Chelsea under Mourinho, whatever. You're going to talk about something in the past, but you're probably going to come on and say, "Hey, Frank, how you doing? How are you holding up? How's everything?"
First question, right out of the blocks.
I mean, it's going to be something basic, but you're not asking him. And I'm assuming there's a little more detail here in this edict from the Premier League. You're not asking him, Frank, thanks for joining the show. What's the process for getting back to play?
Yeah.
I mean, he can't answer that. That's not his job. But you're not going to, say, hey, it's a wonderful Monday. How's everything going? All right, let's talk about 1998. I mean, you kind of have to at least start with how you doing, how's the family doing, everybody okay?
Yep. Sky, these are the numbers. Sky paid £1.2 billion to broadcast games this season. BT paid £325 million. They have been told all access to managers and players will be revoked if the Premier League's guidelines are not followed. Clubs have agreed to provide their manager for interview every 4 weeks and a player every 2 as the broadcasters are hunting for content. The access comes with all questions relating to the impact of the shutdown have been banned.
Again, if it's about the impact of the shutdown on a club or on a league or whatever, I get it. Because, these broadcasters... So now this is getting a little more specific into, like, pundits and stuff, too.
Yep.
It's not their job. That's not their role. But the effects personally, I think that's maybe a little bit of a stretch. You can't stick your head in the sand about it, but you're not going to be asking a pundit or, a manager or a player about the process to return to play and how testing is going to be done and stuff like that.
Sky's management, and then an email was sent to Sports Mail for the sports section of the Daily Mail, and so they're revealing the contents of the email. Sky's management go on to list examples of questions deemed off limits, including any mention of voiding the season,
Fair enough.
whether games should be played behind closed doors,
Yep.
furloughing or salary cuts,
Yep.
and even the implications for Liverpool's attempt to win their first title in 30 years. And the outbound email to the Daily Mail says, clubs are extremely nervous about putting anyone up for interview at the moment, so we must stick to the following processes. We should avoid news, in quotation marks, interviews as much as possible.
Oh, that's fine. Because, let's go back through those. So, first one about declaring the season null and void, you're going to have a court case. Like, let's just be real here. If that happens, you're going to have a court case. Mm-hmm. So, does the Premier League, if they make that decision, want somebody who's a member of the Premier League giving an opinion that is opposite of what the Premier League does? No. That's going to come back to bite them in the courts. So, that's an obvious one. The Liverpool part, is going to be part of that conversation. That all makes sense. That's all logical. And that, again, you go from seeing a headline about, you can't talk about it. So they're going to act like it's just a sunny day and everything's fine. No, they're just not going to talk about these aspects of it because that's not what the interview is for. And that's not what the Premier League is in a position to discuss right now. So that's understandable. I don't have a problem with that.
Because there are always ways, and this is, I think, the challenge that we give ourselves in the business. It's when you have an interview that can only, quote unquote, do certain things or go down certain roads. I think
Right.
It's a challenge for that individual interviewer to sit there and it's like, okay, what can I do here to keep this interview light and airy in a very tough time? How can I go around questions that I'm not supposed to ask? Because if you want to ask those questions, the individual that the Premier League is providing you / the team, they're not going to put themselves in any kind of legal jeopardy. As you said, they're not going to sit there and voice an opinion that's going to jeopardize what's going on with their team within the construct of the league or anything else down the line. But there are always ways to get a good interview out when you have someone like a Frank Lampard there. First question, as you said, out of the blocks, how you doing? What's it like right now? How are you keeping yourself busy? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
There's always an in to get an interview underway, and then where it goes is where it goes.
Yeah, you're not trying to play gotcha with Frank Lampard in a situation like this to get him to say, if they declared the season null and void, that would be a really stupid thing to do. You're not trying to get that out of him. So I would hope not anyway. If you are, then yeah, you probably shouldn't be a partner of the league in broadcasting because you're kind of screwing over your partner if you do that. That's,
right.
Kind of a no-brainer. So that makes sense. That when you read the headline, you're like, oh man, that's craziness. But no, that's fine. That all makes sense.
And at the same time, it appears that Sky is not going to ask for a refund of £370 million if the season isn't completed one way or the other.
Well, we'll see about that. Business is business.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good so far, but if it isn't, maybe they don't ask for a refund, but maybe that comes out of what goes in next year.
Increased access, doing other kinds of programming.
No, there's a trade-off.
Yeah, there's always something that you can sit there and say, if we don't ask for this rebate and we continue to be a good television partner, Maybe, you cut us a solid when it comes to negotiating the new deal. Maybe you give us a little more access than we're used to when it comes to players. There's always those kinds of things that you can sit there and massage when it comes to a contract.
No, there's a trade-off. There's absolutely a trade-off. If Sky does that, it's a great thing for the Premier League because it's going to help a lot of teams that are staring at a big financial problem in the face. But
Yep.
Sky will get their payment for it one way or another. Maybe I'm just cynical about this because this past week and weekend I got back into, I don't know if you ever read it, I'm sure you did back in the day, the Late Shift, the movie the movie that was made about the book that was written about Leno and Letterman and all the maneuvering for the Tonight Show on NBC.
Yep.
That alongside a great piece, I think, over at The Ringer about the oral history of Fox getting the NFC contract in 94. I think 93 is when they got it, but 94 is when they started broadcasting it. So reading about all the maneuverings behind the scenes with networks and TV, Sky's not just going to say, oh, yeah, we're fine. Here's money. It's cool.
Yeah, no, it's
like how it works.
371 million pounds.
Yeah, we don't need those games. It's no big deal. We're fine. Yeah, they're going to come back and say, yeah, okay, yep, you can keep that money for now. But here's what you're going to do for us.
Yeah. Roy Hodgson, manager at Crystal Palace, told Reuters, he said he believes that the Premier League season must be played to a finish after the COVID-19 shutdown instead of using quote-end quote artificial means to decide the champions as well as relegation and Champions League spots. Hodgson said teams might have to accept increased safety restrictions and having to play more games in a shorter period when play resumes. Quoting Hodgson, everyone is in total agreement we need an end to this season. We don't want artificial means of deciding who wins the league, who gets into Champions League, who gets relegated and promoted. Ideally, our players would have 3 or 4 weeks minimum to prepare for the first match back, but I accept there may have to be a squeeze on that time frame. It might mean extra restrictions at our place of work. It also means that we have to play our remaining matches in a shorter period than time we normally would have done and subsequently receive a shorter break between the seasons. He also paid tribute in the article to the magnificent efforts of frontline workers during the crisis and that the NHS should not have to rely on charitable donations.
No, I've said it from early on in this. I think you need to prioritize finishing the current season over just starting the next one as soon as you can. I think it's going to create fewer issues and give you more time to solve issues if you wait than as opposed to just declaring it null and void, then having to go to the courts to battle everything out where it comes to promotion, relegation, titles, European spots, all of that, which will hold up the start of the next season anyway. I think you're better off to finish the current season when you can finish the current season and then adjust the next season as needed. Like Hodgson says, are you going to have a little bit less time between seasons? You very well could. Are you going to look at maybe some different kinds of rules, maybe some differences in game day rosters, these kinds of things? Yeah, I think you can. And those are things that you can do to get back into a normal calendar and back into a normal time frame as opposed to inviting a whole bunch of controversy by figuring out some system to declare things without finishing the season. I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, no, not at all. From the Telegraph, Sam Wallace and Mike McGrath. Arsenal has allegedly told their players they can avoid wage cuts through Champions League qualification.
Okay, so, and this is, again, why you need to finish the current season. And, I mean, that absolutely could be true. That's an interesting way to put it. Now, this is, again, being alleged. This is not a definite, like, this is what they said. Let's be real here. But you look at the table, if it will cooperate, and you see that Arsenal can avoid wage cuts for the next season by qualifying for the Champions League. That makes absolute logical sense. I mean, clubs have been in a situation before something like this. If you're not going to qualify for Champions League, if you're going to get relegated, whatever, if you're going to lose money the next season, wage cuts will happen. So Arsenal are in 9th. They are, as things currently stand, 8 points out of the final Champions League spot. There is the question about Manchester City and being banned from the Champions League that has not been resolved as of yet. Let's say that they are. That would mean Arsenal's 5 points out. These are the reasons why finishing the current season is probably going to be the way to go whenever you can start playing again. Because that's a significant amount of money for an Arsenal. Would Arsenal accept an idea now that, we're just going to cancel the season, declare things as they are, and move on to next year? No. Because they have 9 games, or actually they have 10 games left, Arsenal, to make up either 5 or 8 points. That's doable. That's absolutely doable. And no, this is where people will start to argue, well, yeah, but Arsenal's not playing well. That doesn't factor in. That doesn't factor into a legal challenge to this. It's, can that happen? Yes. There is a possibility of Arsenal doing what it takes on the field to qualify for the Champions League, which would mean a lot more money, which would mean they don't have to slash wages. That's kind of important to a club like Arsenal, so they want to finish the season. As does Spurs, who's 1 point ahead of them, as does Sheffield United, who's 3 points ahead of them, Wolves 3 points ahead of them, Manchester United. Even Crystal Palace and Burnley are 1 point behind Arsenal. They're not out of that conversation just yet. So, no, they want to finish the season. And just Arsenal's claim here, there's nothing wrong with that. That's typical.
I think the pay cut percentage was 12.5%. According to the Telegraph, the proposal is believed to have been a non-starter with many of the squad who currently sit, and you broke that down. The Telegraph understands the measure was put to Arsenal players this week as the club tried to negotiate a pay cut, the like of which has so far proved impossible for any other Premier League to agree with their squad.
We've talked about this before when these things have come up. It's interesting that some clubs in other countries have been able to negotiate a pay cut and get something done, and Premier League sides seem to be failing at this. You cannot stick your head in the sand about it. Clubs are losing money, and some clubs are not in a position to lose much money, and they've got to figure these things out. It's a different situation club to club to club. That's why it's hard to negotiate a league-wide reduction in salaries, and maybe it's even too early if you want to get into the books and say, well, clubs don't have to do that right now. Maybe they don't. But we don't know when action's going to resume either. And maybe they will. And maybe by doing it now, they're able to mitigate some of it in the long run. Who knows? That's what's so hard about figuring all of this out. I think back to Johan Cruyff at Barcelona. He made a deal with his players, one of his last seasons there, as he was his golden generation, his dream team was starting to break up and get older. If they won the league or got to the final Champions, I don't remember what specifically it was, but if they did these things, they would get a bonus. So, like, these kinds of arguments are typical. These kinds of ploys from a team, it's typical. But to frame it in this way, that's not a shocking thing to say that, hey, look, we're looking at wage cuts next year. And again, players who are under contract are under contract. They don't have to do that. But players who are coming to the end of a deal or starting to negotiate their next deal, well, yeah, that money might not be there. If they don't make the Champions League, it won't be there. If they make the Champions League, is that enough to make up for the losses that they're facing? Maybe. Possibly. I don't know.
I think the number was £84 million is what they're looking currently. If nothing changes, £84 million would be trimmed from the roster one way or the other if they do not make Champions League. So that's what they were looking at.
Well, and then the other way you'd trim it, because, again, you can't just say, hey, you're on a 3-year deal, well, now you're making less than we signed. You can't do that.
No.
Unless the player agrees. But you could sell that player.
Yes.
And say, oh, you're making more money than we want to pay at this position. We're going to sell you, and we're going to bring in a cheaper replacement. That's where you can get to that. So,
right.
We'll see. But this highlights the need to finish the current season, in my mind. It's something that you're just going to have to be patient. And if you finish the current season in the fall, if you finish the current season behind closed doors, you finish the current season in early 21. I have no idea when it's going to be, but I think you have to finish the current season. There's no value in skipping ahead and starting the next season because it's not going to start on time. I mean, that's already understood, I would think, at this point. You've already made the decision by FIFA to, change the transfer window dates and make those moves that you need to make. So you're not on outside of players whose contracts end June 30th. You're going to have to deal with them. It's a small number. And, loans and things that have already been agreed upon to start or end June 30th, July 1st. Okay, you're going to have to deal with those. But that's much easier than dealing with Arsenal going to the legal system and saying, yeah, you guys declaring the season's over and we have 10 games left and we have 5 points to make up or 8 points to make up to get the Champions League and bring in £100 million. We're going to go try to get that £100 million in the courts. Have fun, guys.
Yep.
Nobody wants that.
No. Speaking of Arsenal.
Yes, we have been.
Yeah, remember the discussion we had about a particular individual last week?
Yes.
All right. Now, take this, once again, from the source for whatever it's worth. 35-year-old Sasha Wright has opened up about her 2-year relationship with Unai Emery during his time in London and why Emery feels she cursed his spell at the Premier League club.
What?
Yes. The 35-year-old told The Sun newspaper, and I'll put that word in quotes, that the former Arsenal boss would use Google Translate to swoon her before revealing that Emery would stay up until the early hours watching football matches in bed. She ended the relationship in September 2019, saying Emery was not ready for a serious relationship. Quoting her now, "It was then that he blamed me for getting the sack. He told me I was a white witch as I had brought him so much bad luck."
Okay, so first off, the publication is generally known for being trash.
Mm-hmm.
And two, now the publication is trading in stories that the National Enquirer would maybe even think twice about running.
Yep. Quoting her again, he said, "It was the day we broke up that we started to lose. He told me he was so stressed out that his mind wasn't in the right place after we separated," end quote.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with a big no on all of that.
Right. Manchester City is keeping an eye on FFP right now, for obvious reasons.
Well, yeah.
So, they're keeping an eye on all the negotiations in and around FFP to figure out whether or not they are probably going to have to go through the court system or they get to kind of do things as is and continue to have their owners possibly use more dollars to bail them out in the current financial.
Whoa.
What?
That's some wild editorializing you just went through right there.
Probably.
First off, they've already been charged with breaking the financial fair play rules. So that part doesn't go anywhere based off what happens with FFP. That's something that has to get sorted out one way or another. That's already been done. That happened before this. Two, you're making an allegation that the club has completely said that doesn't happen. Now, could you be right? Yeah. The owners could just pump in money however. What I don't understand about this, and maybe I'm just trying to figure it out looking at it from the outside of how these things go. So one of the things that was alleged in the FFP rule breaking in this case was that the owner, basically family-owned businesses, airlines, all kinds of different things, are sponsors, and the owner cooked the books about these sponsorships, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if it's your brother who owns the airline that's on the front of the shirt, and you are deciding to handle this and saying your brother's airline gives your club a check, and then you report it as a bigger check than it was. That's how it went down, according to the case, right?
Yep.
Why didn't you just give your brother money, and then your brother wrote a bigger check that matched what you were going to report? Am I crazy to think that that's like the way they could have handled this?
You'd like to think so, perhaps.
I mean, wouldn't that be the way you can get around it?
Yeah, I mean, come up with other ways to get the value of the check figured out. Bring money one way or the other. Boost the sponsorship elements.
No. It's not about the sponsor. That has nothing to do with it. That has zero to do with it. It's the fact that instead of giving the airline money to them, then have them give you back, which, like, you giving the money to the airline, I don't think, unless you can prove that, which that's why I would assume these people have shell companies and all kinds of different ways to do it. Couldn't you have done that instead of lying about, the check was for $75 million, but it was only for 15? Like, why didn't you give them the rest if you were going to report it that way, and they're just going to give it back to you?
Yeah, it's just, you sit there and it's so easy, you would think, to sit there and work the shells on the table.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, why aren't you doing it that way? I don't know. That was kind of ridiculous to me as I was thinking about it. I'm like, why are you misreporting the amount of the check? Why don't you just give your brother's airline or your brother's whatever money to sort this out and then do it that way?
It's just, if the quote-unquote sponsorship value of having Etihad Airways or whatever sponsor you want to put on the front of the shirt at any given time is worth X, then sit there and say, look...
This is a very important part of this. That's why I'm cutting you off right there on a second.
Right. Because
this is where UEFA gets into trouble. They can't say what the value is.
No, they can't.
They can't come out and say, well, Etihad Airlines is overpaying you. That's good business.
Yeah.
Like, if you get somebody to pay you more than the value is reportedly going to be, that's doing good business.
Mm-hmm.
UEFA can't do anything about that. So, no, they can. That has nothing to do with it. It is simply, in elements, and none of that matters. It is simply, they said that the check was more than it was. And the check was deposited, and this is part of the audits, and it was shown, well, no, it wasn't what they said it was. Like, that seems like something they could have found a way around. I'm a little surprised at Manchester City's lack of good shadiness here in
just
handling this.
Literally, give the money, then give it back.
That's what I would have thought, but that's not what they did, and they've been busted. Now, them looking at what happens with financial fair play, it's not about the case they've been busted on. It's about what happens next. And financial fair play is a huge issue with what happens in Europe because it's tied to revenues. And revenues are going to be nowhere near what they would have been this year because of the coronavirus outbreak and because of games being canceled, postponed, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going to have to figure something out about financial fair play, or they are going to suppress the market even more because of this. And I don't think that's what UEFA has intended with financial fair play. So whether it's a moratorium for a year, whether it's, creating a system to justify spending up to a certain amount, I don't know. But I don't think it does anybody any good if they keep it strictly based off the way financial fair play has been defined in the past.
Yeah, it's just in the future, just give the money and give it back. Figure out a way to zero the whole thing out.
Come on, be a better crook.
Yes, that's the T-shirt right there. Be a better crook.
If you're gonna do it, at least do it well.
Yeah, if you're a bad crook, then I think you deserve your fate, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. If you're bad at what you're trying to do here, yeah. If you're good, you can at least respect it.
Yes. Serie A this morning.
Okay.
You and Yvette from the Daily Mail. The Italian Football Federation are hoping to test all Serie A players for coronavirus in May before restarting the league after the pandemic struck the country. Serie A was one of the first major leagues to be postponed March 9. Federation President Gabriella Gravina says, as soon as the conditions are right, we'll finish the championship. Although there is still no set date on when the league will return. 12 full rounds left to play, Juventus and Lazio up top.
Yeah, I mean, Juve's 1 point ahead of Lazio, 9 ahead of Inter. So, again, you've got a lot of games to play. There's a lot to be decided in Italy, and you know, they want to finish the season. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that idea. They don't know when that's going to happen. In terms of this, and it gets the headline because, you know, they're saying they're going to test everybody in May. Well, first off, they're going to need to test everybody before they start playing again. That's just a fact. And if they do it in the start of May and then they don't start playing again until July, they're going to have to test them again, like flat out. You're going to have to test them before you can get back to activity. I'm sure, even though that hasn't been reported, I'm sure that's what Germany did as teams returned to train. I'm sure there was testing before they started training. So that's a duh. That's going to happen whenever they return to activity. We know that. If they're going to try to do it in May, well, there's 2-3 weeks before they're going to do that now. But that's the idea, and there's nothing wrong with that. Is it likely? In Italy, I don't think it is right now. But if you're going to test before you start resuming activity, and right now the earliest you can resume activity would be the beginning of May, well, then that's the plan.
Gravina, in an interview with Sky Sports Italia, said, soon there will be a meeting. We will establish the procedure, which we will then communicate. We will start, I hope, at the beginning of May with tests to ensure that players are negative and training can follow. Will we play through the summer? We don't have a deadline, but the idea is to finish the championships. The article also says that there were a couple of Serie A stars who've already been diagnosed with COVID-19. Dybala, Matuidi, and Rugani are the three that were put in the article.
Well, yeah, but weren't those a long while ago?
Yes.
Okay. So
it is not a current situation that they are fighting.
Yeah, I think there's just this fear that you see that and everybody freaks out, but they were sick and they recovered, and it's done for them. It's going to be hard. It's going to be harder in some countries. I think Italy and Spain could be two of the hardest to resume action. And, you have the comment from Brescia's president saying that they would just forfeit games. They're not going to finish the season. Well, they're also at the bottom of the table, and they're 9 points away from staying up. Could they stay up? Yeah, they could. Is it likely? No. So they're in a different conversation than a Roma, who right now is 3 points out of the Champions League, than a Milan, who's 3 points out of qualifying for the Europa League. Then a Lazio is 1 point away from winning the title. These are all big-time financial situations. Lecce is going to be in a different conversation because they are level on points with Genoa, 1 point behind Sampdoria, 2 points behind Torino, 3 points behind Udinese to stay up. So they're not going to want to just pack it in. It's back to, in my opinion, there is nothing insensitive in saying we want to finish the season. From a legal standpoint, from a competitive integrity standpoint, it is the best way forward. Now, do we know when that can happen? No. There's no way to know that right now. And I think most people who are saying we want to finish the current season are not saying it has to be done by this date, no matter what. We'll do whatever it takes to play it. No. It's we want to finish this current season. We don't know when that's going to be. This is the plan we have right now. It might change by lunchtime. That's where you're at right now. But I don't think there is any benefit to not finishing the current season. I think it creates more issues than it eliminates. I don't think it eliminates anything.
No, I don't think it does either. I think that it's always... I think that saying that you want to finish something, I see zero wrong with that. I see it, but You don't know what the timetable is going to be, but I see zero harm in sitting there and saying, yeah, we'd like to finish the season because, obviously clubs have their own interests because of standings and such. But I have traditionally seen nothing wrong with sitting there saying, yeah, we'd like to finish the season and make sure that everything is all laid out when it comes to standings and such. I've seen zero wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it because it's about the financial implications. It's about the sporting implications. Anytime you decide to cut a competition short, whatever you do to decide the competition, because it's not just about winning a trophy, it's all the other financial implications of it. You're never going to be sure. We talked about Arsenal. You can say, well, Arsenal hasn't been playing well, so no, I don't think they qualify for the Champions League. But you don't know. You don't know what happens. How many times have we seen a team go on a run? You can't say, well, they haven't played well, so yeah, you can just call it because they wouldn't have any chance anyway.
Right.
You can't do it that way. It's a mess. It's not going to be easy, but I think people need to be consistent with that in the game in Europe, especially because you're talking about coming to the end of seasons and you got to finish them because I don't know what your argument would be to not finish the current season and just start with a new season. I don't know what the justification is for that. Like, how do you sell that? What are the points of that? Because you're not going to be on the... No, there's no... What's the economic? Tell me what the economic benefit of not finishing the current season is.
Well, and I'm just looking at it specifically from the standpoint of not spending any more money on anything going on and just going ahead and scrapping everything and getting ready for the next season, even though that you have players online and things like that. It's basically a planning argument.
But you're not going to spend any more money on the current season. What about contracts? Are people going to say, oh, well, just don't pay us anymore, then season's over? No. And then you're going to try to save money. What about the legal costs? Because that's coming. I don't think you save any money. And maybe the time when this started was when people thought, well, we can't finish the current season on the calendar that we currently have, but we can start the next season and be on the same calendar. I think that's at risk. I don't think there's any guarantee of that right now. So there's no benefit to stopping where you're at and just moving on. I can't find the benefit to doing it.
No, I was trying to play devil's advocate with the argument. I don't see any value in it either.
It doesn't hold up. You don't save money by doing it because I guess you would potentially save win bonuses, stuff like that. But if you're Arsenal, you're potentially losing money because you don't have the chance to qualify for the Champions League. So for anybody who would be possibly saving some money by ending the current season now, I think there's far more that would be potentially losing money by doing that.
Yeah.
And that would be the argument against it.
And then you get into the argument and the discussion about the new landscape. And we talked about that last week. How many clubs are going to be on the other side? How many are going to be operating the same? I think the answer is close to nil. But how many of them are even going to be back? Period. Because for every club we can sit here in the Premier League and sit here and say, or any major league wherever, that they're going to be back and it will be a new financial model. How many clubs will not even have the financing or the wherewithal to be a part of the new normal? And I mean, we've named a bunch of clubs in the lower divisions, and I think that that's where you look and you sit there and it's like, that's where the new normal is going to be without question.
Yeah, we don't have a way to know that right now because we don't know when this ends. So there's really nothing you can do in terms of saying, clubs are going to fold. They're going to fold either way. They're going to fold. If you're going to stop the season now, if you're going to start the next season as soon as you can, that's going to affect that in the same way either side of it. I guess one of the arguments, I don't think you intended to go there, but it opens the door to it. The possibility of a league trying to finish the current season with a club that has gone bankrupt.
Right.
That would be the only thing, and that happens in a season. I mean, it can. We've seen it. So you just have to – those games are forfeited if they can't be played.
Yeah. Period.
But that can't decide what happens for everybody because that's a small number. Are there clubs who are going to, face financial peril because of this? Yeah, absolutely. That we know that. But is it, 90% of the clubs? No, it's not. It's not. The new normal is it's going to be different. I mean, you're not going to spend as much because you're not going to have as much to work with to start with. You're going to have to build all that back up. But that's going to hit everybody in the way that they spend. When new contracts are signed, they're going to be for lower amounts. When transfer window opens, you're not going to see the same types of money being spent. That's how it starts. So,
yep.
I think you've got to finish the current season and just move on from there and then get your calendar back in alignment however you want to get your calendar back in alignment. This whole idea of this is the way things have been, this is what we got to do, the season's got to start in August or September, that might not happen this time around, and that's fine. Article from the Evening Standard about Barcelona. One of the presidential candidates who is running to be president of the club, and this is a membership-driven club, and you have these political battles that occur every cycle. Victor Font has said that the club could face economic bankruptcy and moral decay under the current board. We've talked about the economic bankruptcy side, and they have poorly managed their finances for quite a while and just paid and paid and paid and paid and paid and paid some more, and then somebody else said, well, you're paying this guy, so I need more money too. Okay, here you go, to try to keep a team together, and they've had a lot of success. But now they're in trouble because they don't have the revenue coming in to match the salaries that are going to get paid out. And that's one reason why the players, I think, agreed to take a huge pay cut or deferral. I don't know what the exact terms were of that. Because the club does probably face economic bankruptcy in some way. The longer this goes, the more at risk they are. And you're talking about a giant. And there's other clubs that are giants that are in these kinds of situations. And that's part of this whole conversation, because it does nobody any good in Spain for Barcelona to fail as a business. It does no one any good. You want an example of it? Look at Scotland. When Rangers fell apart financially, did it benefit the Scottish game? No, it didn't. It didn't do anything good. So this would be a very, very bad thing. And it's going to happen in different leagues around the world. The longer this goes on, the more this conversation is going to come up. We will see. We will see how Barcelona handles it. We will see how others handle it. But this has got to be part of the conversation at every club level, league level, nation level, UEFA, CONCACAF, CONMEBOL level, and FIFA level, to prevent as much of this happening as you can. And I know that we don't like to hear this, but are smaller clubs going to fail in Spain? Yeah. Don't know what level, don't know which ones. I don't have all the financials in Spain to look at, but are clubs in the second division, third division, etc., going to go out of business because of this? It's very possible. What is going to have a bigger effect on the Spanish game? A third division club going out of business or Barcelona going into bankruptcy? It's Barcelona, because they drive so much of the revenue for the entire country in the game. And it would have a catastrophic effect. So, I don't know. I don't know how you avoid it because Barcelona made a lot of bad decisions to put themselves into this conversation. They also couldn't expect to see that, this is what would happen in 2020. And this is where you're at. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to, when you were done discussing Barcelona, Real Sociedad has gone back on their initial statement from Saturday, saying that they were going to allow their players to train as soon as Tuesday on site if they were to train individually after undergoing a COVID-19 test. The club has gone back from that plan after getting criticism on social media. And so on Sunday, they said that the players will now continue training from home and that they never intended for the squad to prematurely return back to normal.
Yeah, that's why these clubs and people with clubs have to be careful about statements. Like, I don't think they legally could have in Spain. I don't know the full picture of the stay-at-home orders in Spain, but I don't think they could have legally actually had training at the facility.
Right.
Just be careful with this kind of stuff, folks. Be careful with how you put this stuff out there. Don't say a bunch of nonsense. We've got more things around Europe to get to. We've got your tweets to get to as well. But, John, why don't you tell us about our friend Steve Apolinsky and Apolinsky and Associates?
Why did I know you were going to go there?
Because I'm good at this.
AA-legal.com. And you can request a free consultation. You can dial them up at 404-377-9191 or shoot him an email at Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. Knowledgeable, compassionate, successful trial lawyers when it comes to personal injury, premises liability, nursing home abuse, and neglect. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in verdicts and settlements, serving clients in Georgia and Alabama. Their goal is to provide the best legal representation for their clients and families. Wrongful death, personal injury, trial lawyers, and they have been recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine as one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia. Once again, you can get a free consultation on the website, aa-legal.com. Give them a call, Apolinsky and Associates, LLC, trial lawyers at 404-377-9191. You can do live chat on the website as well. Shoot them an email at steve at aa-legal.com.
Also, don't forget about our MLS Fantasy League. When action resumes, the league presented by Jason Wright Agency will be back in action. Maybe we'll figure out what we can do to kind of re-kickstart things. Maybe we'll start from where we resume. I don't know. It depends on what MLS does with the structure of it as well. But the Jason Wright Agency, you can follow them on Facebook, Jason Wright Agency, or on Twitter, Jason Wright AGEN. Longtime supporter of the show and our fantasy league. Lots of fun talking about all the ridiculous team names and John having players on his team that aren't in the league anymore. Creates a lot of good times.
Oh, come on, man.
Well, you do it. I mean, it's happened.
I do. That is not a dispute.
I know it's happened once. I want to say it's happened multiple times.
I think it has happened multiple times, actually.
I think it has. I do, too. It's kind of messed up. Make sure you are following some of our other friends out there like Wild Heaven Beer. They're doing lots of different things to benefit their employees, but also benefit the community. They made hand sanitizer, and I think they've actually packaged a pretty big container of it you can buy if you haven't been able to find it, like me. You need to make a run by the brewery and pick some up. And also pick up some of their different beers. They just unveiled Fauci Spring, which is an acai flavored beer, which I'm curious to try. That sounds very interesting. We'll be talking to some other breweries in the local area as well, since it is such a big part of the soccer community and how that intersection happens and what different breweries are doing during this time. Everybody's trying to get creative to function and find ways to keep the business going, because it's not the same business it was a month ago. It's difficult. One new business I wanted to mention, because I ordered their product Friday, and it was amazing. On Instagram, follow casa.cardoza. Cardoza, and you can order empanadas, which is what I ordered. They're adding new stuff all the time. They will deliver it to you. It's pretty awesome, and the empanadas are pretty amazing. So
we ordered like 15 of them.
Yeah, we ordered 15. They're small. They're little empanadas. Ordered 15, and they were gone. Let's see. They got here late Friday afternoon. They were gone by lunchtime Saturday.
Strong.
But they're that good, and they're good price. Great, quickness with the delivery. Highly, highly, highly recommended. Casa Cardoza Empanadas, and they'll deliver all over the Metro Atlanta area. So. Really good stuff. Highly recommended. Big time soccer fans, big time members of the Atlanta United community as well. And
at the same time, don't forget to support your local businesses as best you can in this time. The boss and I are still trying to sprinkle all of our meals to a lot of the businesses here in the Decatur area. And if you can, fantastic. If you can retweet, if you can repost on Instagram, any kind of local businesses that you see. I know that Hampton and Hudson has been doing a lot of stuff recently on Twitter, and we've been retweeting that. But if your business, or if your friend, or if your family is running any kind of business, and it's all a part of the larger family that we have here, if you know somebody who delivers, somebody who's printing T-shirts, who's somebody who's got a little store of their own, let us know. We'll retweet it. We'll like it. We'll send it on. And that's what this is all about. It's about, as we've said, rising tide lifts all boats, and this is definitely a time to do that. So let us know on our Twitter account, at Soccer Down Here, at Longshoe, at OSG Nelson. Let us know about your friends, your businesses, your favorite haunts, and what they're up to with deliveries and menus and their businesses and all of the operations and things like that. We'll retweet it. That's what this time is all about, making sure that we all get through to the other side in this.
All right.
Oh, good morning.
We got a little bit of news. MLS and Fox are teaming up for a new esports series. We talked about other entities like NASCAR doing this. MLS has partnered up with Fox and their eMLS series to do the eMLS tournament special. It's going to be on FS1 on Sundays. MLS players will team up with the eMLS player from their club and play other clubs around the league. MLS Works and Fox Sports will make donations on behalf of each matchup's winner to Feeding America as well as Food Banks Canada. So far, according to the report over at Front Office Sport, Chicharito, Nani, Paul Arriola are going to participate. And the way it'll go, each MLS player will face off in a one-on-one matchup, while the eMLS players will then face each other, and the winners of each match will face each other to close out the broadcast. So, good times. They've done pretty well with eMLS. Some of the numbers are surprising if you don't pay much attention to it. The Series 1 event in January accumulated more than 1.1 million views on Twitch. This being on TV, I think TV ratings are all over the place right now, but could they be bigger? Maybe. I'll be curious to see what they draw with this. It's really interesting, but Fox and MLS and eMLS will be on TV coming up, and I don't have a start date, but coming up pretty soon, I would assume.
Well, and all you really have to do is look at the ratings and viewing success that Fox has had with NASCAR and doing the eNASCAR events and furors that come out of wrecks and things like that as a part of the flavor of it all. But the notion that folks want to see and be a part of live event programming, and you're seeing that right now with, over 1 million people, I want to say, watched the event at Virtual Bristol last weekend. I don't know what the numbers are for this weekend, but you're seeing that kind of rating success and that kind of viewing success move its way over to other networks. And NBCSN did an IndyCar event this past weekend at Michigan International Speedway. So I think that with the success of esports in general, it made sense to bring that to the over-the-air viewership. Fox sees the successes in that, and so it makes absolute sense for them to add to their e-content by adding eMLS to the discussion as well.
Yeah, I think they saw what ESPN's done with NBA 2K as well, so you've got a lot of templates for it, and I'm excited to see it. I want to see how they produce it, how they put it together. There will be play-by-play during it and all of that, and we know our good friend Kevin Egan has done a lot of the eMLS stuff. I'm not sure how they're going to put that together because it's all going to be remote, so we'll see how it comes together, but keep an eye on it coming up on Fox very, very soon.
Let's see. Tafka is in this morning after our hour one discussion, and he wanted to ask, with clubs that realize they can't make it, do you see some combining of teams, assimilation, etc.?
It's possible. It happened back in the day. It's a different time now than when you saw clubs merge, and a lot of people would point out, a lot of the teams that are called United are because of that. It was two clubs that came together, but generally that's really early on in their formation. You're going back to the 1800s in a lot of cases, sometimes the early 1900s. Would you see that now? I think it's far less likely. I do, but could it happen in some cases? Sure. I think it'd be low down the pyramid. I think you'd be talking about, from an English perspective, I think you'd be talking about, conference level clubs. I don't know if it would happen with even a League 2 level club. I don't know if it would happen where two clubs decide to merge as opposed to go out of business, because if they did, it depends on how you structure it. I mean, if you've got, let's try to walk through it real quick about why it would make sense to do it. If you are, let's move up a level. Let's say you're in League 1, so you're third division, and you're in a very precarious financial situation, and you're probably going to go into administration and probably going to go out of business when this all gets started. But there is a League 2 team nearby. It plays in the same town or same very close vicinity, because that's going to be part of this. It's going to have to be somebody who's right there, and they're in the same situation. But the owners are able to come together and say, look, we've got, at least between the two of us, we've got a League 1 spot, and we don't want to lose that. So you guys with the League 2 team that are going to go out of business, close up shop and come join us, essentially, and bolster the finances, and you'll be with us, and they'll have to then redo the new ownership and all that. Could you find a case to do it? Yeah. I just don't think it's very likely these days.
Yeah.
I think those cases are going to be few and far between.
Off the top of my head, I have a couple of teams that I think are going to have issues on the other side in the English pyramid. And obviously Bolton is at the top of the list for obvious reasons. And
let's take Bolton real quick.
Sure.
Is there any club of any substantial size nearby that could join forces with them to bolster their ability to stay alive?
Good question. I'll work geography.
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to be harder the more isolated you are. I think it's almost impossible then that's the case. Could it happen with smaller clubs, in the London area? Yeah, that would make sense if it could. But outside of that, it's going to be really difficult, because it doesn't make sense for Bolton and a club in the southern part of the country to do it, because why? That's not how it would work.
So, I mean, the ones that I have off the top of my head are Bolton, Macclesfield, Southend United, and those are the three that I would think of that would be in the worst possible shape. And as long as others stay away, maybe a Charlton, depending on what happens there. But those three off the top of my head, Bolton, Southend, and Macclesfield, because Southend and Macclesfield have had problems paying their players on time over the last year.
Yeah.
So for those three, as I sit here and I work as Google Maps to figure out if any of the three of them are close to each other, those are the three that I would focus on. But then you get into, would the rest of the clubs in either League One or League Two or the Championship challenge the notion of that merger, because you're denying all the other clubs in the pyramid the opportunity to get those players from those rosters. You're denying free enterprise.
I think that's a harder argument. I'm sure, because it has happened over the years, and I don't know when the last time it happened was off the top of my head, I'm sure there's probably some kind of procedural element to it in the FA's laws and the football league's laws. So there would be a process. That would be a hard argument to make, I think, to say, well, they should both fold because we want to buy their players. Or we want to sign their players, that's a tough one. I think you might have to figure out, okay, the way I said it would be basically for a team to protect its standing. If it's a League One team and they can't sustain it, but there's another League Two team or another League One team or whatever nearby who can bring together the resources and sustain it, well, then it makes sense. Now, from a player registration standpoint, would you be able to keep all the players from both teams? Probably not. It would be because you would keep the spot. I'm just trying to think about this logically now. You would keep the spot of the team that you want to keep. So if it's, let's say, Team X in League One and Team Y in League Two, you're going to keep the League One spot. So that's the club that will survive. Do they change their name to represent both clubs or something? That's very possible. But that's the league spot that would survive. So the team that doesn't survive, even though their owner and resources and facilities, all that kind of stuff, might become part of the other club, the players are registered to a club that would not exist anymore. So you wouldn't be able to use it as a way to keep players from both teams. Would you probably have the inside track on signing guys? Well, yeah, duh. But would you have, would they just move over to your roster? No, I don't think so. So that perspective, I think, can be handled, but it would be a way for clubs to keep the best league position, because that's where the money is. The higher up the table you are, the more money you can make. The more money you make in prize money, etc., that kind of stuff. So that would be the justification for it, would be for a club to say, we can't survive where we are, we want to survive where we are, we need help to do it. Hey, your club's about to go out of business and you're next to us, so why don't we just join forces? That's going to be a small number of situations.
Right. So then let me give you the current standings and the scenario that we're playing out here. Bolton, odds are they're going to get relegated from League One and head to League Two. Macclesfield, 45 minutes apart by a drive from Bolton Stadium, is 10 points clear of the lone relegation spot back to the National League. And they've already been docked 4 points this year for not paying players about a month ago. So Macclesfield, in theory, with 9 matches to go, 10 if you're in some other places, is 10 points clear. Their spot in League Two is fairly safe. How would you massage a team that's being relegated and a team that's being safe that's in a lower division?
So,
lower team safe.
Yep.
Higher team not safe, going to be relegated, and both dodgy financially.
It's going to come down more to who's less dodgy. And that's going to be a tougher one. I don't know about the financials of a team getting relegated at that level in the pyramid. I would assume that they'd probably bring in whatever prize money that they would have brought in would be more than the team that was in the lower division. So you'd probably want that money to come in. So that would be the spot you would keep. I'm assuming. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's difficult with this. I'm looking back at it now, and in England specifically, the clubs that you would know that have merged in any time recently, these are clubs that you have probably seen in the FA Cup. Dagenham and Redbridge. They were created by the merger of Dagenham and Redbridge Forest in 1992. Redbridge Forest was created by merging 3 clubs in 1979. Rushden and Diamonds was another one that merged in 92. And Havant and Waterlooville, which is another one we've seen in the FA Cup in some fairly recent times. That was created by the merger of 2 clubs in 1998. There's a couple of mergers that happened in 2007 that I'm assuming are I'm looking to see if I can tell real quick because it's not that important. But I believe these teams are in the conference. Hayes and Yedding United and Solihull Moors.
Solihull Moors has traditionally been in the top of the National League, but they haven't been promoted. But to extend our example,
is when those mergers happened.
Yeah, to extend the example, if we include Charlton Athletic, who is in the relegation zone in the Championship, and Southend United, who is worse financially in the relegation zone in League One, and they're about an hour apart on a drive.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of large-ish club from a merger perspective, I mean, it hasn't really happened in the modern era of these different leagues. FC Twente in the Netherlands was created by a merger of 2 clubs in 1965, but I believe in 1965 the Dutch league was still amateur. Like, it hadn't even turned professional yet, so it's hard to even compare those times. You had a few mergers in Germany. 2 of them, Köln would have been the one that's the biggest club that did it, was in 1948. You're coming after World War II, so that's kind of a different era to create this. In Italy, you had some clubs in the 20s that merged. Roma was a merger of multiple clubs. Sampdoria was the merger of a couple of clubs in 1946, again, coming after World War II. And Fiorentina was a couple of clubs that merged. So, I mean, it would be somewhat uncharted territory. For example, and this is one you'd have to dig into, and maybe this makes it into our Soccer Over There special about what could come from this. In 1999, Bury, Oldham Athletic, and Rochdale had a proposed merger to become Manchester North End in 1999. No idea what caused that to fall through. There's one reportedly in 1964, a proposed merger between Manchester City and Manchester United.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 1964, and it was proposed by the chairman of Manchester City. So
yes,
Sheffield, there's been debates about should Sheffield Wednesday and Sheffield United merge. 1987, there was a proposed merger between Queen's Park Rangers and Fulham to become Fulham Park Rangers. Interesting. In Italy, and this would be one to get Nick involved in 2001, there was reportedly a proposed merger between Genoa and Sampdoria, which would be 2 larger clubs that would have been talking about this. So, could it happen coming out of this? Yeah, I think the situations where it makes sense for it to happen are kind of limited. It's got to be clubs that are basically neighbors for it to really make much sense.
Nathan Pugh has been on fire this morning in the Twitters.
What's up, Nathan?
He says he could see Atlanta and Orlando combining. We need an Atlanta United 3 squad.
Yeah.
And Nathan, in our Premier League discussion, says, let the Reds play, please. And his daily PSA is to vote the hashtag 2017 free burrito match, also up the Reds. That's all, John.
Yeah, I figured we would put the ATL Greatest Win tournament on hold over the weekend, and we'll get started again with it this afternoon with the next 2 rounds in the initial first round. We'll go ahead and launch both of those, get into the round of 32 starting tomorrow.
So what happened in the open brackets, the mini brackets that you posted initially?
Nothing
anything
surprising yet. No, I mean, it's the first round. It's what you expect. Like, anytime you have a tournament, like you see, the first round matchups all pretty much go as expected in something like this. It's where you get later that you get some tougher choices. So
no doubt.
They're coming.
Yeah, and we mentioned what's going on in the EFL. The EFL football league clubs have put their squads on mandatory leave, but have told British players not to go abroad. The EFL has confirmed 2 clubs that training is suspended until May 16th at the earliest. Clubs have started to tell their players training will not recommence for more than a month under instruction from the top of the EFL.
Sky Sports this morning reporting Premier League clubs expecting to return behind closed doors. The FA is offering Wembley and St. George's Park as venues to finish the Premier League season should the league make the request. Richard Garlick is the director of football of the Premier League. He, along with the league's medical advisor, Mark Gillett, are liaising with clubs on a regular basis on player welfare and what could realistically be expected of players if and when the season resumes. So, let's see. When you're looking at these venues, and specifically St. George's Park would be one, to give you the ability to play a number of games on the same day. There's also a 228-room hotel on site, so a place for players and officials to stay in one place. And it's geographically placed to make it work. It's kind of in the middle of everything. So, also, according to Sky, more Premier League clubs are this week expected to announce agreements with players over wage deferrals and wage cuts. Friday, we'll see another meeting between all these different stakeholders. And last week, the Premier League shareholders video conference focused on the immediate concerns over financing of clubs in the Premier League, EFL, and on down the football pyramid. This week's meeting will probably talk more about logistics of getting back to action and what it could look like. So, we'll see. But there's still the idea that closed doors in England is how things will come back, and possibly the idea of neutral sites to do that.
Many championship clubs have already started to talk about organizing friendlies behind closed doors. Contact has been made, according to the Daily Mail, over hosting practice matches in late May, with clubs considering playing at their home ground rather than on training pitches in an attempt to reintroduce players to matchday conditions. There is a belief, according to the Daily Mail, that if football returns in June, warm-up games should be staged for the well-being of players. The EFL estimates it can finish all games, including playoffs, within 2 months. A championship club official is quoted as saying, "The view is that behind closed doors could be a practice run and get everyone prepared for how it's likely to go if they come back and say you can finish the season without fans."
Yeah, well, okay, but it's all behind closed doors. I don't know where that last part came from. That's a little confusing, and it doesn't need to be. Everything right now is reportedly going to be behind closed doors, but playing some friendlies behind closed doors as you ramp up, yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. That's part of a preseason. And you have to look at this as a preseason. You know, it's a shorter one, but yeah, you've got to get guys ramped up to be able to play. I don't really have an opinion too much on, you do it in the stadium or do you do it in the training ground or whatever in terms of the league games. If it's behind closed doors, I don't think it really matters. I think the one thing you want to make sure doesn't happen is the public gatherings outside of fans. Because we saw that when they tried to do closed-door games before everything shut down, and that did not help with any of this. That's one reason why, if you're going to be behind closed doors, you're not going to have fans involved, it might be best to do it at neutral sites and do it at sites that have nothing to do with the teams participating. Maybe that would prevent some of that. I don't know. That's going to have to be a huge factor in this decision, is you want to avoid that type of stuff at all costs. You don't want people... Was it Paris that you had the fans like outside the stadium gathering, and that kind of defeated the whole point of it? So you want to avoid those situations.
We can now officially also add Taiwan to the list of countries who have started their football seasons. They started their Taiwan Premier League this past weekend, so now I believe the number of countries that are playing professional soccer matches is now up to 5. It's Belarus, Nicaragua, Taiwan, I think Burundi, and Tajikistan, I think, are the 5 right now that are playing matches in their professional top flights.
Jeez. Okay, a couple things in the general sporting world that can give you some ideas about how things could go. The NBA, this is from ESPN, executives and team medical personnel are talking about a plan that would have a 25-day program for players to complete before the season restarts. And that plan would have an 11-day stretch of workouts in which players would maintain some level of social distancing while ramping up training, followed by a 2-week training camp with entire teams participating, if that's approved by medical officials. Logistically, that makes sense. You know, it's basically you're starting on individual fitness. You can get guys doing that, so then when you're able to resume full activity, you're further ahead. You're not starting from scratch at that point. So makes a lot of sense to look at that kind of thing. The NBA is also trying to figure out what they're going to do with their draft, because their season might not be finished yet. And there is an idea that potentially the season could run through Labor Day weekend, which would mean the draft and free agency period would be later in September. So those are some things that the NBA are discussing and looking at how this could go. You're going to hear more and more from all the different leagues. I know Major League Baseball is still trying to figure things out. Right now, you know, college football and the NFL hasn't really had anything to worry about yet. You're going to have the NFL draft here coming up. That can all be done remotely. You're not going to have, you know, OTAs and those kinds of things right now that we wouldn't expect any of that to happen. But nothing has been, you know, there about putting preseason at risk yet. So we don't have anything there just yet. Just kind of waiting to see. I haven't heard much on the hockey side. I see an article at ESPN about neutral site playoff games potentially, but I don't know much what they're thinking.
Yeah, it would be what they're looking at is possibly Ralph Engelstad Arena, the home of the University of North Dakota. North Dakota is one of the 4 states currently that does not have any kind of a shelter-in-place order on hand.
Okay.
So I guess that was why they were suggesting it. It's North and South Dakota, Nebraska, and Arkansas, I believe, are the 4 states that do not have shelter-in-place. But yeah, the name that the stadium or the arena that popped up was the Ralph in the home of the University of North Dakota Fighting Hawks.
And would they do it behind closed doors?
That is still up for debate right now. They don't know if it would be behind closed doors or if it would be with fans.
That's kind of shocking that they would even be considering with fans right now, but...
Yeah. But I think, once again, it goes to North Dakota not having the shelter in place, and I think that's why that...
of course.
Yeah, that option was put out there.
But still, to even think about
it. Oh, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
That's kind of reckless.
Yeah, so... so I've heard the Ralph, and it's a great venue when it comes to college hockey. But yeah, I have more questions than I do answers when it comes to the National Hockey League, and once again, like the NBA, how are you going to determine Are you just going to stop the schedule as is, and the teams that are in are in, and teams that are fighting for spots are just done? Are you going to bring everybody to single site and have it go there? It's because, once again, like the discussion we had in hour number one, because there are always teams that are going to be fighting for positions, like an Arsenal, that want to improve their lot and get into the playoffs and do whatever. Is the season done and dusted at this point? And the teams that are in are in. I think that's the question that the NBA has, the National Hockey League has, and the soccer leagues that we talk about on a daily basis. That's the largest question for me.
Yeah, and I don't know what kind of recourse teams in the NHL would have if they're, a few spots out of missing getting into the playoffs right now, and they just say, well, it's done and you're not in. Would you be able to sue for that? I don't know. I would assume you could. I mean,
yeah.
I wonder what kind of arbitration things they have built into franchise agreements in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the standings in the Atlantic Division, Team 4 and Team 5 are separated by 7 points. The Metropolitan has issues because you have 3 teams that are separated by 1 point, and you're looking at position number 4 there in the Metropolitan Division. And then in the Western Conference, you have a couple of teams that are separated, 4 teams separated by 5 points in one division. And then you have some distance between Team 4 and Team 5 in the Pacific. So there would be some teams that would be bent out of shape if things just ended as they currently are.
Yeah, they should be. That's part of the problem. That's why it's really hard to figure out how you would stop the season if that's what you choose to do. MLSsoccer.com had a report on Friday about Cincinnati's managerial opening.
Was going to ask.
It's a little, I think we forget about some of this kind of stuff with everything going on. The whole Ron Jans saga. You don't have a full-time manager in Cincinnati. According to MLSsoccer.com, Dome Tarrant was contacted about it. They did not have a formal interview. Glenn Crooks out of New York has said that Dome wants to bring his staff, his people with him that he had with him in New York. And I guess that could have been one of the things in Cincinnati that would have been a deal breaker. They did not get to an interview. Dom Kinnear and Jaap Stam are 2 of the 3 final candidates. So you've got a manager in Dominic Kinnear who has won MLS Cups, who's had a lot of success in this league, but hasn't had a whole lot of success lately. And Jaap Stam, who has never been involved with MLS before, but you're talking about one of the great defenders in the game in modern times. He was last at Feyenoord as manager, and let's see, he resigned in October of 2019 after a 4-0 loss to Ajax. He said that it was better for the club and the players if he stepped aside. He succeeded Giovanni van Bronckhorst in March of 2019 and was gone in October. Before that, he was at Zwolle and he was at Reading. What was his time at Reading like? Do you remember?
It wasn't all that great from what I can recall. I mean,
the numbers aren't bad. He 98 games, he won 40, he lost 35, he drew 23. Man.
Yeah, and I think at that time that Reading was lower third of the table, but then when the wheels came off, they really came off. And then I think he was dismissed after a bad run early in the or mid-season.
Yeah, Stam he got them to the playoffs in his first season, signed a new deal, and in March of 2018, he left after a run of 1 win in 18 matches.
Yeah.
That had him 20th in the table. So it fell apart. One interesting thing about Jaap Stam is after starting his time at Zwolle as an assistant and then becoming caretaker manager, He joined Ajax in 2013 as an assistant coach, defensive coach, and he was with the young team as well, the reserve team, and he would have been working underneath Frank de Boer at that time. So there's a very good chance that if Jaap Stam is interested in MLS, one of the reasons why would be reports he'd be getting from Frank de Boer.
Yeah, because I had seen I had seen Kinnear and I had seen Stam. I had not seen the Dome Torrent interest in FC Cincinnati, or FC Cincinnati's interest in Dome Torrent.
I mean, if you're looking at those three, Dome Torrent would be, in my opinion, the best of the three based off what he's done in MLS.
Right.
I think Dome Torrent's an excellent manager. I believe he will be back in a job in MLS the next opportunity that he chooses to take. I think he'll do a good job. I think he did a good job with New York City. I think his New York City teams were better than Patrick Vieira's, in my opinion. I think they were more well-rounded. Is Dome an interesting personality that maybe his personality can be an issue for some? Yeah, I think that's valid.
Mm-hmm.
But his ability as a manager, his football brain, great. I like the way he thinks about the game. I like the way he sees the game. Obviously, his work as the number 2 for Pep Guardiola for that long, you have to have respect for what he's done. But I thought he did a great job at New York City. And it's a shame for New York City that for whatever reason they couldn't get on the same page about long-term future at New York City. We'll see ultimately if that was the right decision. I don't think it was, but we'll see how Ronnie Deila does when things get back in action. Dome Torrent will be in the league. If he wants to work in MLS, he'll find a job.
Yeah,
I really think he will. And Cincinnati, so that's 3 very different kinds of managers. I mean, Dome Torrent, who's had success. New York City was the best team in the East last year in the regular season. And his time with Pep Guardiola, you have to factor that in. Jaap Stam has had some success and has had some failure. In Europe, no connection to MLS at all. Dominic Kinnear has lived and breathed MLS from day one, but you could say that maybe the league has developed past him at this point.
Yeah.
Because his time after 2012 MLS Cup in Houston, he hasn't had success as a manager in the league. And that was a long time ago, and that was a very different league. So he'd give you stability, but I don't think he would fit where they're trying to go. Stam would, in the idea that they built a team for a Dutch manager and to play a certain way, and okay, he would understand that.
Right.
Now, would he be successful? We don't know. Dome Torrent would as well, and if that means you gotta give him more leeway on his staff, I think it's worth it, but that's just me.
And the player acquisition and what to do with, do what you can with the squad in this season and then give him the keys and turn it in what direction he wants to do when it comes to player acquisition for 2021.
Well, I don't know if that was a factor or not at all. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. And did you get another tornado warning and go hide in a cave?
Yeah, no, it's walls are closer than they were originally.
Okay.
Well, you know when you're sitting in one place for X amount of time and it's a hardwood floor and
why were you sitting on the floor?
Well, that's just where my computer was at the moment. So
You put your computer in the floor?
yeah, I put my computer on the floor.
Okay.
And because then that way I have easy access to everything around me. It's easier. And so
everything around you is on the floor?
Yeah, it's on the sofa. It's on a pit group, and it's almost like having a wraparound desk.
It's not a desk, it's the floor.
No, but the sofa acts as an elevated platform, and I can have multiple things up and running, and I've got the floor with me. But then when you sit on the floor sometimes for an hour and 40 minutes, sometimes your hindquarters kind of lose their feeling, and you kind of have to walk around a little bit.
So then you were walking around carrying your laptop?
Correct.
Okay. Your logic is... I don't know.
And
And this took you how long to figure out?
No, I've known it. I just get reminded of it sometimes. I just don't get it. I mean, this is you walking around.
I am having a very bad day.
That's you.
I am in no mood.
That's closer.
That sounds about right. Oh, man.
See, now that the one country that we haven't talked about yet
Okay.
would probably take an hour and 40 minutes to talk about, and we probably need to consult our oracle in this particular country to get all the
I don't
411.
think he's got answers either, because this thing is getting stupid.
It's past getting stupid. It just flat out is stupid.
But Scotland is honestly not that different from some of these others. I think it's just people have had less concern about going and saying crazy things in the media there. You know, I think these arguments are probably happening everywhere, but it's just people aren't bringing them to life. What is going on with Rangers at the moment, as best as you know?
Okay. All right. So let's see, it was Friday. Friday, as we were going off the air, we were under an hour to determine whether or not the professional teams in the SPFL would call the season then and there, and then teams would get relegated. They would be all pissed off. Two teams in particular, I think Partick Thistle, I think, was one of them that was going to be relegated, and they were threatening legal action. So that was where we were when we left the air on Friday with about an hour to go. Supposed to vote on a resolution, this is from The Guardian, that would abandon the season with current standings as final. The league issues an update Friday evening when all votes hadn't been cast. You were supposed to vote by noon our time.
Okay.
One team did not vote. And one vote, one way or the other, from this particular team, I think it was Dundee United, would swing the decision in the overall one way or the other. So Dundee's paper was missing.
Their paper was missing?
The vote was missing. Did not exist.
How were they submitting this?
Carrier pigeon, I guess. But then it comes out in the media that a signed and dated no form from the managing director was being circulated on Saturday. In a letter issued to the clubs on Sunday, the chairman of the whole Scottish Professional Football League, he tried to explain. Here's what Murdoch McLennan said publicly Sunday. One championship club attempted to submit a voting slip which did not reach the SPFL until late Friday evening. Earlier, at 6 o'clock on Friday, which is 1 o'clock our time, that club had confirmed in writing to the SPFL that any attempted vote from that club should not be considered as cast. So basically, if somebody from the office just decided to write either a yes or a no on a piece of paper, hand it to the SPFL, the chairman of Dundee is like, nope, that one doesn't count. That isn't our official vote. So if you guys get a piece of paper, then that ain't the one.
There was a fake vote?
Well, this was trying to prevent any kind of a fake vote or any kind of wrong.
Then how did they officially vote?
They haven't yet.
Because they can't figure out how to vote.
No, because they are just the lone precinct that has decided not to vote.
No. How did all the other votes happen? How did everybody else vote?
It's ballot on paper. Yeah, ballot on paper.
Hold on. Ballot on paper. Last time I checked, none of these people are in the same place. So how does said ballot on paper end up with the people who are counting the votes?
Fax, carrier pigeon.
Fax. They're breaking out a telex machine at this point. Okay.
Probably, yeah. So
all right. So they have to. Let's say it's fax.
Sure. Everybody had to fax in by 1 o'clock or by noon our time Friday.
First off, I want the logistics of this because I want to know how stupid that part of it is. I mean, these days, you can download an app and create a free fax line, and you can write it down on a piece of paper really big. Dundee United says no. And take a picture of it and fax it. You could do that.
Uh-huh.
Now, I want to know if that's how they're doing this. But you've got Dundee United saying, wait a minute, that wouldn't be our vote. But then how are they going to vote? Like, this makes no sense.
Uh-huh.
Do they not understand how to write yes or no on a sheet of paper and take a picture of it and send it to the league office?
Well, I think what they did is that somebody wrote down no, and they didn't send that official no in, although someone may have sent in another ballot by paper or fax and picture, and that wasn't the official one.
Absolutely pathetic.
Yeah. So that is where we are with Dundee. Dundee sits.
They still haven't voted.
No. We have one precinct.
Take a picture. Write it down on a sheet of paper.
We have one precinct outstanding that could swing the entire Scottish Professional Football League's standings, promotion, relegation, and finances
across
Dundee,
all the levels.
All the levels.
So it's a tie now.
It's a swing vote. It's not a tie. It's you have to have 3/4 of a vote from each division for the vote to count across the board.
If they say yes,
it
goes through. If they say no, it doesn't go through.
Correct.
It's to that point, and they can't figure out how to vote at this stage,
or don't want to. Yeah, they're either figure out how to vote in the yes/no sense. That would be part of it. Although I don't know how you would send it in.
I'm just saying they can't logistically submit their vote. They're to this stage of it that they should have voted. They didn't vote.
Yep.
So now, so then right now, if it's not a tie, which way does it go? Since they missed their window.
It'd be a no. It would be a no. Yeah.
So the yeses are saying, well, wait a minute. We're missing a vote here.
Uh-huh. And the no's are saying, well, we're missing a vote here.
Well, no, the no's are happy because it's a no, right?
At the moment, yeah.
Yeah, so the no's don't want him. They're like, oh, no, they missed their window. Let me make sure on this. The no's have the vote currently, right?
In theory, yes. That is the paper that is being circulated that was allegedly written by Dundee's managing director.
Okay, so but then to correct something you said, the no's do not care if Dundee's vote shows up.
Yeah, because
their way would go through right now if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, the numbers are there. Okay, so here's where we are. Now, Dundee, outlying precinct, still hasn't voted. Now, Rangers have called for an independent investigation and the suspension of the chief executive of the SPFL because of all of this.
Well, I mean, you kind of have to because this is ridiculous.
And there's talk of voter intimidation and all this.
Yeah.
Never underestimate your opponent. Expect the unexpected.
Oh, Dalton.
Mm-hmm. He's right.
See, that's who you need in this situation, really. So the chief executive is the Rangers want investigation about all kinds of voter intimidation and all other kinds of things. McLennan says about the SPFL chief executive, I'm entirely satisfied based on all the information at my disposal that the SPFL and its executives and legal advisors have acted wholly properly at every stage in this process. So Rangers, one of the reasons that they're hot is they want, the Rangers are unwilling to share what they believe to be key evidence with anyone other than an independent body. So I'm guessing that Rangers thinks that they have evidence of voter intimidation or what have you that has swung the vote one way or the other. And they don't want to give it to the SPFL. They want an independent group to sit here and look at our evidence to determine if whether or not we're right. So the owner of Hearts and Budge feels clubs were coerced into accepting the resolution, which would have relegated Hearts from the top flight. Quote, the board has clearly discussed and considered various options. This is exactly what we would expect of the board. However, to then dismiss all but one option and present only this option for a member's vote within a very limited time scale must surely raise the question of whether the board is attempting to unduly influence the members' decision-making process. Budge added Hearts will propose a temporary reconstruction of the league, being an expanded premiership, as was already rising on the agenda. She says it's a major embarrassment for Scottish football, one I believe so easily could have been avoided.
Okay, so I've got a little bit more information here.
Go for it.
An account, and this has been retweeted by Pure Fitball, who I've been on their podcast before covering the Scottish game. They do great work getting into deep dive on analysis and stuff at times as well. The account is CCCAMMY1, Mr. Calder, who is a fine Rangers man. Inverness chairman stated, and this was from Saturday just after noon our time. The Inverness chairman stated that they could have voted for the resolution and received £320,000 on Monday. However, they couldn't do so as it would relegate clubs and lead to redundancies within days. The chairman of Inverness went on to say that the SPFL told all clubs they would not get 1 penny if they didn't vote the way they were told to. The chairman questioned why the money could not be sent out regardless. When asked why many clubs voted the way they did, the chairman of Inverness stated, clubs had a gun held to their heads. If they didn't vote the way they were told, they wouldn't get the money. He was asked which club was so desperate they would act like that. He declined to answer. The chairman of Inverness also gave a detailed timeline of when Inverness, Partick, and Dundee sent in their no votes. The Dundee vote never reached its destination, apparently. All clubs were chatting via WhatsApp and posted when they sent in their votes. So that's not how they voted, but that's
how they talked about how they were voting.
Chairman or chair people of these clubs were talking about it, and they all posted when they sent their vote in the WhatsApp. But we don't know how they actually voted. But that's a little more detail. So the league was trying to get a yes vote, and they were offering money to do it. I mean, kind of, but not really. They were offering to immediately send out payments. But that would have ended the season, and that would have relegated teams. And some voted no because they didn't think that was the right way to do it. Whew. This is a bit of a mess. And now you've done a vote. It didn't go the way people wanted, but there has been some kind of issue with part of the vote, and now you can question the vote because of that. And Scottish football is in trouble because of all of it.
And apparently...
Hold on.
Go for it. All right.
We've got more. East Fife, what level is East Fife in?
Efforting.
They issued a statement about this yesterday, just afternoon. And they did give an update on this previously, but let's see. So, East Fife wanted to confirm the situation from their club's perspective on the SPFL's resolution that was voted on by all member clubs at the end of last week. The resolution was for season 2019-20 to be concluded now, with current Championship, League One, and League Two places declared as final, and the remaining tranches of prize money paid to all member clubs based on these positions. Mm-hmm. This would have seen Dundee United, Wraith Rovers, and Cove Rangers promoted, while Partick Thistle and Stranraer would be relegated. My board met twice via video conferences on Thursday and Friday to discuss and agree our stance. Although we have no issue with current league positions being declared final from a prize money perspective, the overwhelming consensus was that we could not vote in favor of a resolution that would see fellow clubs relegated without the full conclusion of the 36-game season. You will have seen that 3 League 1 and 2 clubs voted against the resolution, and I can confirm, to avoid any misinformation or speculation, that we were one of the 3.
League 1.
Okay. So as things stand yesterday, East Fife was awaiting further communication from the SPFL on the next stage. And then they talk a little bit more about the things that they're doing. They have a GoFundMe page. They've done a lot of local community stuff to benefit the community, but also to stay connected. And they've started selling their new home jersey, like trying to get pre-orders. They're doing a lot of the same things that Aberdeen has talked about in terms of selling season tickets for next year to bring in revenue now, those kinds of things. So that's the explanation from a club on the vote. And that's from Jim Stevenson, the chairman of East Fife FC.
Yep. Initial target of £5,000 for the GoFundMe has now been reached, and Mandy and Mel have now increased their target to £10,000. So good on East Fife and their supporters.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. As we go, since soccer down here has kind of turned into soccer everywhere on the show, as questions come up with this kind of stuff, and when you see it outside of when we're doing a show live, please give us a heads up. If you need a little more detail, if you need more background, I want to figure out kind of how we dive into some of this, and I want it to be interesting for you guys. So let us know where the gaps are for you, where you have questions, so we can kind of figure it out and help out and do more and more. So that's kind of where we're at these days, figuring out the show as we go. We will have another watch along this week, maybe 2, definitely 1 on Thursday. So stay tuned. We'll have a vote to pick the game. I'll have my vote on ATL UTD greatest win, that hashtag. The next sections of the first round of the bracket will go public later today, and we'll have both sections go up. We'll get into the round of 32 starting tomorrow. So all the stuff that we're still trying to do as best as we can and learn about the makeup of the Scottish League and how they vote for things when they can't vote in a normal way, but maybe
or don't want to vote in a normal way.
Maybe they're using bad apps. I don't know. I have no idea. It's a mess. But we'll keep you posted on all of it as best we can as my Red Bull can falls into the floor. Good
Is that the watermelon?
No, the watermelon's not a breakfast one. The watermelon one I'll have later. It's actually really good. It's really, really good. The summer Red Bull watermelon they're trying to win my business back after Coca-Cola had claimed it with the cherry Coke Energy. So, man, it's a tough call. Might not have to alternate. We'll see. But we're all figuring it out as we go. Y'all stay safe. We'll keep you posted on all of our upcoming activities. And if you guys have requests for activities, please let us know. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Have a good day. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.